Welcome to the Bag Maker's Workroom. I am Chris with Simply Classic, and today is Thursday, February 5th, 2026. Thank you for joining us. We go live every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you can't join live, watch the recording on YouTube at any time. Make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when I post a new video. Today's episode is pre-recorded because while you're watching this on Thursday, I'm traveling to Ohio to teach some workshops at Pins and Needles. So I know some of you will be there, and I'm super excited to meet you. So even though I'm not live, my team members Shauna and Taylor are holding down the fort, and they can answer questions if you have any during the live stream. If there's anything they can't answer, we'll make sure to cover it on next week's live. So today is a sewing episode, and here's what we have planned. We're going to start by going over what's new in the Simply Classic Scoop. Then I'm going to show you one of the simplest ways to modify any bag pattern. We'll feature our customers' bags in Artistry Avenue, and finally I'll announce our giveaways for this week. Before we get started, please take a second to click the thumbs up button below. It really does help me. It makes a huge difference, and we really appreciate the support. So now it's time for the Simply Classic Scoop, and this is where I tell you what's going on behind the scenes here at Simply Classic. As you know, I'm in Ohio teaching some workshops this week, and we're also in the middle of planning lots of different events for 2026. I'll be teaching at Sack Bag and Sew again this year and have some workshops around the country. I also am thinking about doing a little pop-up event in the fall for anyone who lives near our warehouse in Georgia. But these are all works in process, and I'll let you know more when we have the final details. I just wanted to give you a sneak peek. I also want to do more sew-alongs this year. We had our first sew-along last month, and a group of us made the Dior-inspired wallet using the Gemella pattern. It was so much fun. We did it on Zoom, so everyone could be on camera talking, together. We basically just spent the afternoon together sewing, and we had a really great time. One of the things we did that I really enjoyed is for like the first half hour, we talked about all the different ways we could hack the Gemella. And it gave me a lot of ideas that I hadn't thought about before. So, while I'm learning from you, as you're learning from me, we're all learning together, and it just makes it a lot of fun. Some of you shared your photos of your finished wallet. So I want to take a moment to show off your amazing work. So this wallet here is from Brooke from Sew Loot. She made this beautiful, this thing is gorgeous. She added a small zipper pocket on one side where you would usually have your ID wallet, which is very smart because that's great for coins, and that's not something I did in the original hack, and I just thought it was ingenious. The faux leather she used is absolutely beautiful. I think she used faux leather. She might have used leather, I can't remember. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Cheryl decided to experiment by making the outer flap a little bit longer so it'd be easier to fold. She also added snaps to the flap for security. She said that it was a good challenge to think about construction and process, and that's so true. So experimenting is a big part of the bag making process, and Cheryl really did a fabulous job on this wallet. And then Amy did the same thing with her Gemella. She also replaced half the card slot with a zipper pocket for cash or coins. And honestly, that's something we talked about at the very beginning. And she just said, okay, I'm going to do that, and just cut it and went with it. And how amazing is that? I absolutely love it. She did add that extra snap like some of the other folks did. I think that it does help the wallet stay closed a little bit. And, this is really great because a lot of people don't need 16 card slots. We talked about how today we tend to need less card slots than more, and so this is a really good way to work around that, get the card slots you need, and then also get some kind of zipper security section for cash, coins, receipts, or whatever else you may need. And then Deborah actually decided to use a different wallet pattern from another designer, but she hacked it in the style of the Dior wallet. So she used the same flap, but the wallet itself is a little bit different, and it's really beautiful. She actually made a birchen to go with it. So it really came out fantastic. So just a reminder that the original Gemella wallet does have zipper pockets. It does have two, and it's a bifold, but it bifolds the long way versus the short way. So basically it bifolds on the short end. When it lays flat, it's a longer wallet, if that makes sense. So anyway, go check out some of the live streams that we had a few weeks ago, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I really love the way everyone made their wallet a little bit different, and they really did an amazing job. You inspire me, and I'm excited for more sew-alongs to come. Now, on that note, I want to hear from you. What do you want to make on a sew-along? Keep in mind that we usually have about 4 hours to sew, so it can't be a huge project, but I would love to hear your ideas and requests for next time or a future sew-along. So now let's do some sewing. Every week on the Bag Maker's Workroom, I show you a different sewing technique or pattern hack, and today I'm going to show you how to change the style lines of a bag, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. The pattern we're working with today is the Talise. It's our brand new pattern that we just released last week. The Talise is a kind of small to mid-sized tote shoulder bag with two versions to choose from. It was inspired by this Brahmin bag, the Iona. And you can see that it's constructed using a front and back panel and then side panels. But what if you want to change those style lines, as they're called, and make the bag one continuous pattern piece? So for instance, the bag on the right, that is all the same colors, really a beautiful, looks like a cotton canvas or something similar. And then it looks like they just added pieces of leather diagonally without having to piece the actual fabric together is what I would guess on that. So how would you do that, and how would you approach that? So basically we're just going to make one big pattern piece from all the different pattern pieces for the Talise, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So you can pretty much do this with any pattern, but today we're going to be using the Talise, as I said. So this is the Talise that I made, making the change and taking out the style lines. So this is made from one large pattern piece. You can see this is the front. It's nice and clean and sleek. And then on the back, it's kind of hard to tell, but I do have a seam right down the back. There's no seams on the side. There's no seams on the front. So it's a really different take on the bag. Still looks amazing. And basically what I'm doing here is letting the faux leather speak for itself. Okay, this is really a fabulous faux leather. It's our black and silver croc, kind of Brahmin inspired in itself. And I'm just, letting it do its thing. So I'm going to play that video now, and we'll come back and take a closer look at the finished bag. Okay, we're going to go over how to put all of these pattern pieces together and keep the same proportions as the original bag. So the only pattern pieces that we really need to change on this is going to be our front and our sides. So what I did is went ahead and put together one of the front and back pieces. Okay, I just put them together at the hexagon, and then I take two of them together at the fold, so I got a full front piece. On the other front and or back piece, I just put them together at the hexagon. I did not put them together at the fold. Okay. The side pieces, I did the same thing, put them together at the hexagon, and then went ahead and put them, made two and then put them together at the fold. So I have two full side pieces, one full front back piece, and then another front back piece, but only halves. So for us to put all of this together, we need to take into account the seam allowance, put them together at the seam allowances, and then we need to add a seam allowance where we want our new seam to be. So here's how we do that. First thing I did was along each edge of each of these pieces, I drew in the seam allowance. So you can see here, I drew a line all the way down. Okay. So I did that on all of these pieces. I also did it on these pieces as well. So you can see, and I have one upside down and one right side up on purpose. You would go ahead and don't do it at the fold. You're going to do it at the actual place where you would sew this onto the main part of, or the side of the bag. So when we put this together, we want to put it together at the seam allowance. Okay, don't put it together where the edges match, and don't overlap it just a 1/2 inch. That won't be right. You need to overlap it where you would stitch. Basically, if you picture this, you would put these two pieces together, you'd stitch at a 1/2 inch. So therefore you're taking up 1 inch of space, a 1/2 inch on each side. So I'm going to just match up those 1/2 inch lines all the way down. And I did it in a pen so that I could see through the paper. And then I'm just going to tape this in place. Okay, so now I have one large piece here. I'm going to take the other side piece and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to make sure they match at the top and the bottom. And what I'm doing is making sure that these lines are overlapping each other. Okay, so if I pull this back, you can see that the blue line here is matching the blue line here. I'm going to tape that in place. Okay, so now I need to do the same thing with these pieces, but we're going to split them in half because I want to put a seam down the back. So I'm going to take this piece and put it on this side, matching up those lines. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, and this is why I put the line on the back side of one of these pieces, is because it's going to go upside down over here, and I'm going to match that up. Now you can see here that because of how we stitch this together, and if you remember from the original tutorial, we have to let a little bit of this front piece hang off because they're at angles. So you're going to have a little bit of the side pieces, probably they're going to be a little taller. That's okay. We're just going to go ahead and correct it as we cut out the fabric. Or you could even correct it before, either way, and I'll show you how to do that. So now we have one long piece, okay? However, we need to add seam allowances because now our seam is going to be in the back. So when I put this together like this, this is where I'm stitching. However, at this point, we don't have any seam allowances in this bag at all. So let me tape a couple of the things down. I go through a lot of Scotch tape here. We buy it by the dozens. Let's go ahead and tape all of these little edges down. Okay, so I took a 1-inch strip of paper and I drew a line right down the center, so a 1/2 inch down. Okay, so 1-inch piece of paper, the line's drawn at a 1/2 inch. And what I'm going to do is tape that piece of paper right along that 1/2 inch line. And what that's going to do is add a 1/2 inch seam allowance to the back seam. So there's one, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side because we have to add it to both sides. Okay, and then to correct these little places here, you can just go ahead and trim off the bottom. I'm going to trim off the bottom here on this side. And what you really want to do is match up the bottom of this, all these pieces, and then any kind of correction you need to make, you can make it at the top. So for instance, right here, I can see my side piece is a little bit taller than the front back piece. All I'm going to do is just trim that down slightly. It's not going to make a difference in how the upper lining gets put on. It'll be okay. Just going to go ahead and trim that down. And you can see we're talking about literally, I mean, that's not even 1/8 of an inch. That's hardly any. But it's just enough to get it all evened up. Okay, let's talk about the stabilizer for the piece that we just created, because obviously we need to make this stabilizer one large piece as well. However, the stabilizer doesn't have any seam allowances because obviously whenever we make a bag, we keep the stabilizer out of our seam allowances. So I cut the same pieces as I had before, which is the side and the front and back, but I cut it obviously out of the stabilizer pieces. So this is the side stabilizer. I have 2 of these. I have one front back stabilizer that I went ahead and taped together, and then I have another front back stabilizer that I kept separate. When we put these pieces together, we're just going to line the edges up and tape them together. Now I am going to go ahead and try to line up the bottoms nice and even, and then I can make any corrections on the top that I need to. And then for the second set of side back pieces, I'm going to tape one to one side and I'm going to tape one to the other side. Just again, matching the edges. Okay, so this is going to be our stabilizer piece. So if we take our main piece and we set the stabilizer piece on top, we're going to see that it fits, and we have a 1/2 inch sticking out on either side for that 1/2 inch seam allowance that we added. Okay, so I can cut one large piece of stabilizer. I can cut one large piece from, one of my main fabrics, and then we are good to go. We can go ahead and complete the bag just as normal. There's no changes to the upper lining. There's no changes to the lining itself. There's no changes to the bottom. There's no changes to any other pieces, just these two. And from here, continue on and make the bag as you normally would. Okay. So now from here, what I can do is lay this and cut it out on my faux or my leather or whatever I decide I'm going to use. So I'm going to use this black and silver, and I'm going to have my seam in the back. You don't have to have your seam in the back. You have your seam in the front. It's wherever you want it. There's no, obviously, rule here. So I'm just going to line this up at the bottom. Go ahead and move this down a little bit. Find the center of the silver. And then I'm going to clip this in place, and I like to use these larger hair clips for this. And I don't think my faux is straight at the bottom, so I'll go ahead and even that up. And then I'm going to cut this out. I'll do one line of stitching right down the back, top stitch it, and then basically, besides putting my bottom on, the exterior is going to be done. So just like all the other hack videos that I do, I went ahead and did the lining. So the lining is totally complete. I used red for the inside. This is an old linen that we used to have. We don't have it anymore. I just had a little bit left over, just enough to make the bag. So that's what I'm using inside. I would really recommend maybe the burgundy for the inside if you want to use what I'm using here, which is our black and silver croc pattern. Now, I used Deckerville Heavy on this. Just wanted to try it, see how it was going to work. I think it's going to turn out pretty good, especially since I don't have any seams or anything else to hold this bag upright. I thought the Deckerville Heavy might be a good option. So I'm just going to, this is super easy. I'm just going to go ahead and clip the two short sides here together. And this is going to end up being the back for me. So, of course, if you're doing this method where you want to combine it into one large piece, you're probably not going to have a pocket or any kind of decorative accent, although you still could put something on the front there. I'm going to kind of let the faux stand on its own and kind of be the highlight. So because we added a 1/2 inch here for our seam allowance, I'm going to stitch this at a 1/2 inch. Make sure I do not stitch on top of my stabilizer. And then you could do a couple things here. If you do not want to stitch in the tunnel, you could use some tape or something to go ahead and just get the seam allowance to lay nice and flat. Either some double-sided tape or some kind of Gorilla tape or masking tape or something right over that should hold that down. I'm going to go ahead and stitch though. So I'm going to turn this over so it is right side up here on my bed, and I'm going to start stitching. Now, I'm not sure with the Decaville Heavy if I'm going to be able to go from the back and bring it forward. I'm going to see which way is best. What may end up happening is I might have to start stitching from the top here, come down as far as I can get, and then cut my threads, start in the same hole, and continue down the rest of the way. So let's see how we can get this to work out. So I'm going to start stitching here, coming down from the top of the bag, and then I'm going to just go as far as I can, and then come from the bottom to do the rest of the way for this stitch here. So that's about as far as I can go. I'm going to go ahead and pull this off the machine. Leave my threads nice and long so that I can tie them off in the back. And then I'm just going to slide the bag in from behind and pick up where I left off and then keep stitching. Make sure that I pull these threads through to the back and tie them off. Okay, so I have one side stitched down. I'm going to go ahead and do exactly the same thing to stitch the other side down. So I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to start from the top, work my way down, go as far as I can, cut the threads, and then pick up where I left off. Okay, right about there is my stopping point. I'm going to pull this off, leave the threads nice and long, and then come in from behind and do the same thing. Start in the same hole I stopped. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, tie my threads off, and then we will continue on by putting the bottom on. Okay, putting the bottom on is exactly the same. Basically, from here out, the rest of the bag construction is the same. We'll put the bottom on together, and then I'll go ahead and slide the lining in and finish the rest of the bag off camera. We'll refer you back to the original video if you want to see how to get it all together and put the binding on. But the bottom, we're just going to go ahead and wonder clip this in place. Now I found the centers of all of my bottom corners. So I found it here on the bottom piece, and then I also found the center of the sides and the center of the back, or the front rather. We know where the back is because we already have a seam here. So I'm just going to wonder clip these in place. And the main thing you want to make sure of when you stitch is that you don't go all the way to the end of the bottom piece. So I'm going to stitch with the back of the bag on the bed of my machine so I can see the bottom piece. And I'm going to start about 1/8 of an inch beyond the Decaville Heavy that's on my bottom. I'm going to stitch all the way down, and I'm going to go to about 1/8 of an inch beyond the Decaville Heavy on this side. So I'm not, of course, not stitching on top of the Decaville Heavy, and I'm not stopping exactly at the corner. I'm giving myself a little bit of room, because when I stitch the side here, I want to make sure that I can match up with the same point that I started and stopped stitching on the longer ends. So I'm just going to kind of roll this bag back so that I can get in there. I'm going to start just about, like I said, 1/8 of an inch, just a little bit. Go ahead and do a little back stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to take the other long side, go ahead and put the seam allowances together, or the centers together, which is going to be the center is going to be the stitch line here, and then I've marked the center on my bottom. And then I'm just going to flip this over and I'm going to repeat that same process. So I'm going to flip it over this way and then I'm going to start stitching 1/8 of an inch beyond the decouple heavy and go to the other side and stitch 1/8 of an inch beyond that as well. Okay, so now that that's completed, in order to get these sides to fold appropriately, we need to go ahead and cut the main part of the bag right at the point where the stitch line stops. So my stitch line stops right here. And I'm just going to put a little snip in the bag all the way up to that point. I'm not cutting the bottom piece, I'm just cutting the main part of the bag. I'm going to do that at all 4 points. And then all you have to do is match your centers. And this time when I stitch, I'm going to stitch with the bag facing up. And you can see that by making those little snips, I have this corner piece of the bottom sticking out. That's what I want. I'm going to start right there at that same spot where I started and stitch to the other side. I'm going to do the same thing on this end. And because I'm using Decaville Heavy for the entire bag, it's a little stiff, having to really work with it a little bit, but it's definitely doable. Okay, from there I'm going to go ahead and cut back my seam allowances, and then I will turn the bag and slide that lining in. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people already post Talises out there on the Facebook group. Everybody's done a real amazing job with it. This is truly a designer-inspired bag. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn the bag. Okay, so I have this bag put together. It's looking good. I'm going to, at this point, go ahead and stick the lining inside. And then again, from here, I'm just going to go ahead and finish all of this off camera because you saw how to do this in the original tutorial. Nothing changes here. Okay, you're just going to wonder clip all of this together and then stitch and then sew the binding on. So I'm going to get all that done and then we will take a look at the completed bag. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video. We're going to take a look at the bag and the overhead. Of course, you can see here how beautiful all of this works out. The silver basically centers here, and I made sure to do that in fussy cut. And then you can also see how it does it on the sides as well. Okay, each side has got the silver kind of centered there. It's just the way it worked out with this particular faux. But let's, like I said, take a little bit closer look in the overhead. So just like the original Talise pattern, I have the actual purse feet on the bottom, and I made sure that when I cut the bottom piece, I cut it from a solid section of the faux, okay? Then, of course, like I said, the silver is centered here, and it's also centered on the side, okay? See that? And in the back, there is a seam, okay? So right here, we have a seam. And you can see a little bit of silver in there. You know, you don't see as much of it because of the way that I had to cut the faux, but I think it looks fine the way it is. I think it's really pretty. It just kind of gives a little hint of silver. I also made sure that when I cut this, I used all silver when I cut the binding pieces. So all of the binding pieces, as you look here, all the way around the bag, are just done with the silver. And then lastly, when I did the handles, I made sure I did the handles in the solid part of the faux. So this is the solid black section of the faux leather, and just made sure that I cut it from that section without seeing any of the silver. So on the inside, you can see here, you know, I ended up not doing the pleated version. And the reason why, and there's a very specific reason why I did that, is because I used Decaville Heavy in this bag all the way around. I decided I wanted to give it a try, and with Decaville Heavy, you really cannot pleat these sides. It's too thick. Also, this is kind of a stiffer, it's more of a vinyl than a faux leather. It's a little stiffer. It doesn't have the drape that some of our solids do and our suedes. And so I just basically paid attention to the fabric, gave into it, and made sure that I let the fabric kind of dictate for me how I was going to handle it on the bag. Okay, so of course we have our O-rings on here, and then we have our closure. I used gunmetal hardware. And then on the inside, we have our slip pocket. Okay, the inside is done exactly the same way. There's no changes at all. We have our zipper pocket, and then of course I did not forget the key fob, yay. I ended up using a red linen that I had left over from a long time ago. I think our burgundy Tilda, chambray burgundy would look really beautiful with this. I think black and silver and red or burgundy look really great. So this is the finished bag, of course. I love this. I think it looks fantastic. The changes are just the ones I showed you. Everything else is the same. So it's really a simple change to take a look at the bag and make it look so different. And you can see here how different that bag looks. So it's the same, right? But it's kind of different. And in the in the hack bag, theoretically, we could still add some kind of detail here, no problem. We also, if we wanted to, could have added just a strip here and here to kind of mimic the actual lines here if we wanted to, okay? I decided not to do that, but you certainly can. So what it would do is obviously take out a little bulk because we have less seam allowances. Yeah, so you know, get inspired by this. You all do so fantastic when it comes to these bags and making the changes, and I'm really anxious to see what you come up with. So now it's time for Artistry Avenue. Every week we choose 3 bags that were posted in the Simply Classic bag making community on Facebook or that were emailed to share@simplyclassic.net. If we feature your bag, you can get a free PDF pattern of your choice. You have 30 days to email share@simplyclassic.net to let us know which pattern you would like. So now let's take a look at this week's artists. So Darlene made this Talise with our faux suede, and it is really cool. She's got this gear fabric underneath the O-rings that were woven on, and it is absolutely beautiful. I think that a print behind that is stunning. So she said that at first she was really worried about the binding on this bag, but it turned out to be much easier than she expected. And I know a lot of people are a little nervous about binding, but I challenge you to give it a try, and Darlene did an amazing job. So next we have Corey, and Corey made this Roseanne for his wife. Isn't this beautiful? He used real leather, real hair on hide, and he made real rolled handles, which he said was something he's working on perfecting. And they look perfect to me. I mean, they're amazing. This whole bag is absolutely amazing. He did a fantastic job. I absolutely love it. And then Cindy made this Talise using faux leather and real leather in the middle. So basically that panel that you see there behind the woven O-rings is real leather. And again, I really love the way that the printed fabrics look behind these O-rings. I think it is just absolutely gorgeous. This bag is amazing. She did a fantastic job. And she also made rolled handles for a little bit of a different look, and they turned out fantastic. So thank you to our featured artists for sharing your amazing makes. Don't forget to email share@simplyclassic.net within the next 30 days to let us know which PDF pattern you like. So now let's talk about giveaways. We are giving away 2 PDF patterns to people in comments. Since this episode is pre-recorded, we're going to choose both winners on next week's live stream. So here's how to enter. Just leave a comment on the video, not in the chat box, but in an actual video, and include 2 things: your first name and the feature that you love to include in every bag that surrounds hardware. So for instance, do you love to put purse feet on every bag? Do you like to put a key fob in every bag? What is that one thing that you really want to incorporate in every single bag that you make? So you have until next Wednesday to enter, and I'll randomly choose 2 winners on next week's episode. I'll also pick the winner from last week, And again, the prize is a PDF pattern of your choice, so this is open worldwide. So this is where we usually do our Q&A, but we are pre-recorded today. So if you have a question that my team could not answer, I will definitely answer it on next week's live stream. So thank you so much for joining me for the Bag Makers Workroom, and make sure you join us next Thursday, February 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be live, and we'll be talking about bag trends for the spring and summer runways. This is one of my favorite episodes we do. We do one in the fall and one in the spring. And I just think that I love looking at the trends. I think they're amazing. So we're going to look at shapes, we're going to look at colors, we're going to look at features that are really popular right now. And we're talking about how to incorporate them into our own bag making. So don't forget to submit your Simply Classic makes by posting them in the Facebook group or emailing share@simplyclassic.net. And please remember to click that thumbs up button on your way out. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.